in terms of that piece of like shining a light, it did exactly as we'd expected it to. Probably not quite how we'd expected it to. And subsequently, I got back and they invited me to become a trustee. So I suddenly got this idea of, okay, sport for social change and what can it do and how can it be? So that was the point when I was thinking about leaving Fast Track. I really had this clear vision of, okay, that is where I want to go. I really want to go away from the commercial side of things and into sport for social change. That sort of led me to taking, if I'm honest, which is probably the bit that looks slightly odd on my CV if I look back on it. Essentially, it was a lottery company. That's the best way to describe it. But it ran lotteries in about 5 or 6 different countries in South and East Africa. So Ghana and Cameroon and Nigeria and all sorts of places. And my role was to come in and basically create their first ever CSR strategy, social impact strategy. So I went to this organisation, spent lots of time in some of those countries, again, had some bizarre experiences of having to bribe some Cameroonian police with some footballs and T-shirts we had in the back. I didn't have my passport with. Bizarre, kind of, anyway, very sort of strange and unusual experiences.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest this episode is Sam Shave, co-managing director of Think Beyond. Think Beyond is a social impact and sustainability consultancy. When brands and athletes want to use their platform to make an impact, they turn to the team at Think Beyond. The organisation are perfectly placed at the intersection of sport for social good and brand strategy, enabling them to create successful global initiatives for clients like Disney, ESPN, and the NFL. Sam has been immersed in the business of sport throughout his career. During the episode, we discuss his journey and the turning point that led him to the sport for impact sector. We also discuss his approach to leading the organisation as a co-MD and his vision for the future of Think Beyond. Enjoy the show. Great, so I'm excited to welcome Sam Shave, co-managing director of Think Beyond, to the show today. The social impact and sustainability consultancy that supports leaders and organisations to make a positive impact on the world, both in and through sport. So welcome to the show, Sam.
Thanks very much, James. Glad to be here.
Great stuff. As we always do on the show, we try and give our guests a little bit of a, potted history of you, get to know you a little bit better before we kind of dive into your career and topics like that. So in terms of your childhood, I know you're a pretty sporty individual. I think you probably still are. How best would you describe your childhood with regards to sport and activity?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I am quite, I've got 2 young kids, so the sport has had to take a bit of a backseat recently.
Same here.
Yeah, I mean, sport basically played a kind of fundamental role for me throughout my entire childhood. I think it was the golden thread in some ways between everything that I did. So, I just remember summers, whether it's playing football with my brother in the garden or going to sport camps or playing at school or whatever it was, really. It was kind of, I was once described by a teacher as a Duracell bunny because I just would keep going and going and going because it was, I just wouldn't, I'd sort of be that kid at the end of the night where it's kind of got dark and the lights have been turned off and I still want to carry on playing. So that was sort of me. I wasn't brilliant at sport. I was okay. I was, I played in a lot of teams, but I was kind of, I think the thing that set me apart was more the sort of determination to, as I say, to keep going and I'd run all day and that kind of thing. So I loved it. It was just, as I say, a fundamental part of my childhood and kind of have probably shaped a lot of what's come subsequently, I would say.
Yeah, and obviously back then you mentioned siblings and stuff. So were you competitive as a family or just with siblings?
Yeah.
Was it kind of an active family as well? I mean, because you grew up in Cambridge, right?
Yeah, it was. So me, my brother and my dad were incredibly competitive. I think it was slightly wearing on my mum, I have to say. I think, any kind of, from a card game or Monopoly right through to, we were incredibly...
End up in tables being flipped, board games being flipped over.
Tantrums and all sorts, yeah, exactly. It was, not much has changed in many ways. But anyway, we used to, I remember on holiday, we played tennis and my dad set up a table tennis table and it's sort of in the garage, but he refused to buy a table tennis table. So we just got a massive plank of wood and painted it green and put it on 2 tables. And that was our table tennis table. But, when you're young, it just doesn't matter, right? So it was awesome. Like football in the garden, go and play table tennis, whatever. So yeah, it was, and then sport, I was always very much, I played sport, watching sport I did love and I watched Grandstand endlessly and all the rest of it. But for me, it was all about being out on the pitch and playing and being involved and getting stuck in. That was really where I absolutely loved it, more so than being I'm not a sort of die-hard fan. I kind of I like watching sport, but I'm not, it was really about taking part with me.
Yeah. And in terms of, I guess, school life and academia, you obviously went on to university studying psychology. Was there anything there where you thought you wanted to take sport further from a kind of an academic side? Obviously, you're working in the sector now, but was that always kind of a passion of yours?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I got really close to going into sports psychology. So part of the reason that was going
to be one of my questions. Yeah, whether
sorry, I've jumped ahead. Yeah. I mean, I'd thought I'd always had this idea of I'm not particularly academic. I'm okay, but again, I'm not sort of the brains that went to my brother, unfortunately. But so therefore, I knew I had to do something that I love, because otherwise, it just I wouldn't be able to kind of get on with it. So I always had this thought of sport, and I sort of as I went through life, really random story. I met when I was away. I was doing a bit of traveling. I met Gordon Darcy, the ex-Irish rugby player, and I was chatting to him and. Yeah, we went to the Rio Carnival and I bumped into him. It was very random anyway, it was a whole different story. And I was chatting to him and he said, I use a sports psychologist. And that sort of sparked this idea of, oh my goodness, I could do that. I was chatting to him about it and how it helped his performance. And at university, I actually did my dissertation on golf performance, the impact of kind of competitiveness and well-being and that kind of thing on your sports performance. So I really kind of, went quite a long way down that route in terms of thinking about it. And I think probably what put me off in the end was the number of, I had to go down and do a master's and do all sorts of PhDs and the academic thing kind of reared its head again. And So
when did you graduate? So are we talking like mid-2000s, is this? Or like 20?
Yeah, exactly. So I graduated in 2007. So I was at university 2004 to 2007 up in Leeds.
Do you reckon at that time, I guess, the industry for sports psychology, is it still quite a new thing then? And obviously it was well known then, but was it popularised as it is now, do you think?
I think definitely, yeah. It was much newer. It was kind of, as I say, you're sort of bumping into this sports person that used a psychologist and was sort of, you didn't really hear that now. It's sort of every single part of performance is analysed and, is absolutely kind of maximised, as much as they can. Whereas I think back then it was still, sport was obviously professional and there was this conversation, but I don't think it was quite probably understood the mental side of things, the psychological side of things. I don't think it developed as far as it has now. And I think that was exactly the point, that it sort of felt like it was this emerging idea and this emerging kind of theme that maybe I could jump onto.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll probably talk about it later on, but I'm assuming that the kind of things you learned and what you studied at university is held you in good stead now. Obviously, being a leader, we talk about quite a lot in terms of the psychology of not just sport now, but performing at a high level, leading organisations. I'm really curious in terms of when you finished university, because looking at your career, it looks like it was mapped out, right? So it looks like, I've gone to PR, I've got these, and it's like stepping stones. That's I guess my opinion from the outside. I know it's never linear, like up and to the right every time. But for yourself, did you obviously studied psychology, but then as you graduate, gone to a graduate role, and it was straight into PR then, was it at that point? And was that kind of planned out, is my question, I guess.
It's quite nice to hear that you think it's all planned out. It's quite a retrofit, I suppose, now.
Yeah, either that or you've edited it quite nicely. Yeah, so.
Exactly. You sort of think back and you're like, oh, maybe it does make sense. I mean, at the time, no, it was, I had this thing of I need to be in sport. It's my only real strong passion point. I couldn't imagine the idea of going to work every day and not loving what I do, or at least kind of really being kind of bought into what I do. So I scrabbled around for graduate jobs. It's, you're sort of sitting there and going, and I just had I'd heard so many stories of friends and people I know kind of falling into jobs and then that being their career for 10 years. And so I was really determined to try and not let that happen. So I took a job at a small PR agency called KTB, getting paid, I think, about £14,000 a year and kind of sleeping on my brother's sofa and, all this kind of stuff. So it was a massive hardship, but just, that was sort of, I suppose, my determination in terms of thinking I have to get into sport and I'll do it any way I can. So I certainly, but that first job was a godsend, really. I was incredibly lucky. I was within about 6 months, or even less than that, about 3 months, I was pitching to the Ryder Cup, to try and become their kind of agency of choice and sitting in front of the director of the Ryder Cup and kind of not really knowing still what I was doing or what I was talking about.
Because that was going to be one of my questions. Like, what did that look like at that time? It's almost like, it's not, I don't know if you class it as that, almost like an intern position in terms of like how you described it. Assuming it was really exciting in terms of like, yeah, just from a young, like I'm trying to think back to I think we're similar age, thinking back to myself, like being put in front of those brands and being able to tell I was in a meeting, the Ryder Cup, etc. And was it Lucas and some of the other big kind of accounts you had back then? Yeah, I mean, how much was it left? You left your own devices, you kind of thrown in? Did you have a lot of responsibility, or what was it looking
Yeah, like? I did. And my boss back then, Kate, I remember really clearly, it's actually something I've taken through to this day, is she said when I go to a pitch, I take the most junior member of staff, because if I can sit in front of a potential client and say, this is my most junior member of staff, and look how competent and capable and brilliant they are, that feeds up into the team, right? And they go, wow, if that's the youngest, the most junior person, then the rest of the team must be brilliant. And I just thought that was such a brilliant kind of foresight and brilliant way of looking at things. And it's something, now I'm kind of, in that leadership position, is something I've taken on. And I really try and think, okay, the easy thing, if you like, is to go in and go, right, we'll get this, all the senior team will come in and we'll set that. But actually, as I say, if you can give the confidence that, this person is 3 months out of university and look how brilliant they are, then that just instills confidence, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say for yourself as well, that must have been like the impact for yourself as a young person coming into that straight out of uni, being told that. And then obviously with Kate executing on it, you must have been walking around with your head held high and like chest puffed out. The number
I was always the pub and it became a bit of a running joke. So my mates would be like, go on then, Sam, tell us what you've done today. It's like, I've been strike up. And I was like, I worked with Mo Farah and all this kind of stuff. And they were, in the nicest possible way, a lot of them were sort of sitting and doing relatively dull kind of day job, and I'd have all these kind of stories coming out my ears. So yeah, and it was incredible. It built my confidence without a shadow of a doubt. And, I made big mistakes and I look back and I sort of cringe at some of the things I did and said and, thinking, God, that probably didn't even make any sense. But the point is you go through those experiences and they just, they give you an incredible understanding, an incredible sense of kind of pride in what you've achieved. And when you do win, we won that Ryder Cup account and we ran it and all the rest of it. That's, that is sort of really quite incredible in terms of the belief it gives you in being able to sort of do that job when you're just out of university.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just thinking about timelines at this stage. I know did you move on from there to Fast Track, right? Or maybe I've got the timelines mixed up, but because KTB was acquired, right? Was that part of that acquisition and you wanted to move on, or was it before or after? Am I in the right?
No, so yeah, KTB was acquired by Speed Communications. No, I moved on before that. So I was there for a couple of years, took about 2.5 years. And looking back, I wonder if I moved on too soon. I think it was a small agency and it, as I've explained, it gave me just these amazing opportunities because that's a small agency. That is what happens. You're at the forefront very quickly. And again, I know we'll come on to talk about Team Beyond, but that's a little bit where we're at the moment, where we're a small but growing agency. So people get chucked in right at the coalface. And so I do sort of look back and I went to Fast Track because I wanted to work in football. I hadn't worked in football and I wanted to work on, I think I got the PR and comm side of things I wanted to move slightly away from. And even at that point, I was thinking more, I wanted to be in partnerships and sponsorship and that sort of thing. So an opportunity came up to join the Fast Track team to help manage the Lucas Sport kind of account of all the Premier League and Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, the RFU, the London Marathon. So again, huge kind of blue chip organisations. And I think I just felt that was too good an opportunity to miss, really.
Yeah, because I guess the exposure then for yourself and networking as well, you got obviously, I guess it'd be good to hear how, I guess, the inner workings, the differences between those. So PR versus partnerships versus sponsorship, and how probably definitely talk about it with what's happening, I think, Beyond now. But what's the differences, like the nuances between those things? And I guess in the small agency, you're doing everything, I suppose, but how does it play out?
Totally, yeah. I mean, I suppose my days at KTB was spent, quite a lot of them were spent on phone to journalists, sort of pitching stories. And yeah, I'll leave that one there. I'm not sure that was quite for me, if I'm really honest. But, and I suppose I'd probably argue that going into then that sort of sponsorship is probably a little bit more strategic, because actually you're thinking, okay, we have these properties, how are we using them? What is the overall kind of activation, if you like, of this sponsorship, and you look ahead at the year, whereas I think it was a little bit more tactical at KTB. It was kind of like, right, we're working on, we work with Adidas, they've got a new shoe coming out, we need to sell it into the running magazines, and it was a little bit more tactical in that sense. So I quite enjoyed and sort of, again, looking back, I probably, I got my first chance to develop kind of major campaigns and really think about that. And I think that really stuck with me in terms of, I like the sort of strategy point of view. I like sort of big picture thinking and then, how do we bring this to life? So yes, absolutely. In terms of the day to day, KTB was involved in absolutely everything. My role at Fast Track was a little bit more specific, but probably a little bit more strategic as well.
How did that develop there in terms of you, at that point, you're going to crystallize in, I guess, where you want to be in the sector and what type of role you want to play? Did that play out at Fast Track, or were you kind of still into the...
I think what happened, so this was really probably the point at which I sort of really cottoned on to this idea of sport for social change. I think. So I had, I suddenly...
Yeah, because you're very much in the commercial sector at that point, right? With the partnerships
exactly,
you're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. I was very much in the commercial side of things. And I think I had this sort of nagging itch that, and it sounds a bit grand and, I sort of don't want it to, but it was a bit like this. It was sort of, I had this idea that sport could be a bit more than this. And I didn't think that, I'd been in PR and I thought, well, you're just sort of selling in stories. And that sounds very derogatory. I know it's a lot more than that, but that was kind of my mindset at the time, I think. And then, part of sort of sponsorship was like, okay, that's really interesting. I can see that gets you connections with fans. But I sort of had this idea that, well, but what role has sport got to play in communities and with individuals? And going back to my life, it obviously played this huge kind of absolutely fundamental role in who I was. And the idea that not everyone necessarily had access to that, I didn't like that idea. I thought it should be for everyone. There should be the opportunities of it to drive change. So it was really at that point I saw it. In fact, my dad's, this tiny little advert from the Cambridge Evening News about the street. It was called the Street Child World Cup. And it said, we started the Street Child World Cup. We're looking for volunteers. And I'd spoken to my dad about this idea of social change. And, I think sport has this role to play and all the rest of it. So he sent me this and said, look, I have no idea if this is interest, but have a look. So it was, it was really one of those old school little ads. And I sort of rang a number and kind of was like, hello. And I said, I've seen this advert. And anyway, it's a sort of a long story. Basically, I ended up, actually, that was probably why I was still at KTB, because I agreed to have an unpaid month off to go out to South Africa to volunteer for the first ever Street Child World Cup. Incredibly, amazing experience. They pulled it. It was about a team of 3, and basically the idea was to use the World Cup, which was in South Africa, to shine a light on issues of street children. So use this mega sporting event to really shine a light on these social issues. So I went out for a month. I volunteered. I helped out because I had a comms background. I helped out in a lot of the PR. Amazing stories at the time. We got a Sun journalist and a photographer to come out to South Africa, and they started taking photos of police used to do these roundups. So they used to go literally and find because they would sort of clean up the streets. They go to these street children, round them up, put them in the back of a police van, drive them off 2 miles outside the city and dump them and sort of let them.
And that was just to kind of clean up the external visual of the World Cup, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So there was this amazing moment where we got a phone call to say there's a police roundup. We got the Sun journalist, Sun photographer down. They're taking photos of these kids in the back of this police van. They then get arrested and taken to prison. So we've got these Sun journalists and Sun photographers in prison taking photos of this roundup. Anyway, and it's a huge double page splash in the Sun. This is what's happening in South Africa and all the rest of it. So it's sort of, in terms of that piece of shining a light, it did exactly as we'd expected it to. Probably not quite how we'd expected it to. And subsequently, I got back and they invited me to become a trustee. So I suddenly got this idea of, okay, sport for social change and what can it do and how can it be? So that was the point when I was thinking about leaving Fast Track. I really had this clear vision of, okay, that is where I want to go. I really want to go away from the commercial side of things and into sport for social change. That sort of led me to taking, if I'm honest, which is probably the bit that looks slightly odd on my CV if I look back on it, but a job at essentially it was a lottery company. That's the best way to describe it, but it ran lotteries in about 5 or 6 different countries in South and East Africa. So Ghana and Cameroon and Nigeria and all sorts of places. And my role was to come in and basically create their first ever CSR strategy, social impact strategy. So I went to this organization, spent lots of time in some of those countries, again, had some bizarre experiences of having to bribe some Cameroonian police with some footballs and T-shirts we had in the back. I didn't have my passport with, bizarre kind of, anyway, very sort of strange and unusual experiences. Sort of what transpired was that I built this strategy and tried to write it and the rest of it. And at the time, it's probably almost a precursor to the idea of kind of sport washing. Basically the CEO just wasn't interested. He sort of had to do it because it was part of his agreement with local.
That was going to be my question in terms of your gambling and massive lottery organisation. Was it? Yeah. It was just a bolt-on, right? To say we need to do.
Totally. And I took I turned down a job at McLaren to take that job, and people, one of my best mates, a huge motor racing fan, I told him I would turn down a job at McLaren, and he almost sort of disowned.
He was hoping for those paddock club tickets, right?
So it was and I think that probably opened my eyes a little bit to that. I sort of went into it probably a little bit naive still, thinking, oh wow, they want to do this, and actually it was sort of complete. So I stayed there for 6 months and was thinking, oh good, what do I do now? It's going to be really hard. And the job at Comic Relief came up, and I applied for that and got that. And that was really kind of into that was really into that world properly, I suppose.
Yeah, and I was going to say, definitely sounds like a perfect fit. And at this time, Comic Relief, was Sport Relief launched at this time, or was that coming when you were there?
Yeah, it was. So I think I'm right in saying Sport Relief launched in 2002.
I didn't realise it was that far back.
Yeah, if you see I still remember seeing the pictures of Prince Harry and Prince William in the first ever Sport Relief mile. Well, that might have been 2004, and they look like cherubs, I suppose. But anyway, but yeah, so it had probably been going, I think there'd probably been 3 iterations of it, something like that, 2 or 3 iterations of it when I joined. And I joined in 2000, no, more than that, sorry, there'd probably been a few more than that. I joined in about 2015. And 2016 was the first sport relief I was there for. So I joined basically to manage, and it was the, again, you talk about how luck plays a role in careers. It was the perfect marriage of my passion, I suppose, with the sport social change, but also my experience. They were looking for a partnerships manager to manage some of the sports partnerships. So through Sport Relief or for Sport Relief, they worked with Common Relief, with the Premier League and Premiership Rugby and the LTA and a number of other organisations, and they needed someone to come in and kind of have an understanding of the sports world, be able to manage them and essentially fundraise and raise money for Sport Relief. So I went in and on an initial 1-year contract, and then my boss, Greg Baker, who's now heads up the Saints Foundation, left to go to Southampton, and I sort of stepped into his role. So
this is it's a great opportunity to talk about this, because we have a bit of a trend on the pod around, I guess, communicating and evidencing impact and vision as well. So most of our listeners, they're running organizations doing great work, like literally every day they've got hundreds, thousands of coaches out delivering sessions, loads of impacts. And it's almost like, how do we evidence what we're doing there on a kind of macro scale? Like, how do we show that this is impacting all these different areas of society, which is difficult for organizations. Comic Relief, Sport Relief obviously has a massive platform, is probably one of the best at showing that. Is there any approaches, I guess, that you could share, or kind of when I don't know if you're involved in this, I'm assuming you were, is it like, obviously it's conscious, but is there an approach to say, right, how are we going to showcase all the great work we're doing? And is there any kind of takeaways you could share with the listeners?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, James. And I think, Comic Relief, Sport Relief is incredibly lucky with the platform it has. That's the first thing to say. And, and clearly not everyone, in fact, not many organizations have that platform. I mean, the approach that we took to at that time was through storytelling, and actually it was identifying, stats and facts are absolutely fundamental and absolutely crucial, but actually hearing and then telling the stories of those people that are being affected is the single most effective way of kind of engaging an audience, right? And because of, and that was a little bit because of the platform we had, and obviously a lot of your, listeners from organizations won't have that platform. So I recognize this isn't necessarily relevant, but actually I would still argue, even if you're a small organization, being able to bring to life some of the work you are doing through the individuals you're supporting is still an incredibly effective way of doing that. And, even if you don't have a platform like the BBC to put it out on, then how are you using, we're in a world where anyone can be a storyteller, right? Anyone can use their platform. So how are you using those platforms? How are you telling those stories? How are you bringing to life the impact you are having? I think the other thing that I would say is, you mentioned about kind of having sort of, the impact on society. I think it's about being targeted, and it is really understanding, okay, what is the specific, don't try and boil the ocean, don't say, well, we've got these 10 different outcomes and we're having an impact on all of these different areas. Where is your absolute critical focus? And really zero in that, because I think that makes it easier to then tell the story. Okay, we worked with this, the outcome was they improved their skills and they now have a job. Or, I know that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but ultimately, if you're a bit more targeted and a bit more focused, rather than trying to say, well, we've got lots and lots of different outcomes, I do think that storytelling and therefore that impact piece comes a bit more naturally.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned social media there. I'm curious in terms of, if you go back to when you started your career at KTB, and you said you calling the journalists, trying to sell the stories into the paper and get out there. Like, how different is that world now in terms of social media and what you can do there? I guess maybe does that role exist anymore? What are you doing back there? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We actually set up the Ryder Cup social media account, the Ryder Cup Twitter account. It's amazing. I look back and it's amazing. We've
still got a password or what?
Yeah, quite. Yeah, I remember doing it. We ran this sort of thing with Will Greenwood where we filmed him going around Celtic Manor, which is where the Ryder Cup was, and we filmed his round. And we said, right, what do you think? How are you approaching this hole? And that was I think it was pretty much the first ever piece of content on the Ryder Cup Twitter account. So there you go. That's
pretty forward thinking, man. That'd probably do well on TikTok today.
Yeah, we should redo it for next year. But no, I think you're right. I mean, I think so. And to a certain extent, I'm not really as involved in that PR world anymore. But it's incredibly different, and I think that you control your own narrative. That's really, I think, the fundamental point, isn't it? I know we see it with players, and they don't give an interview and then just have to sort of sit back. Like if something's not what they said or not what they meant, they have a right to reply, and it's much, much easier to do that. And I think that is the the single biggest change that social media has probably brought.
Yeah. So loads of success at Comic Relief. I'm just because I really want to get into Think Beyond and talk about what you're doing, what you're up to at the moment. So like obviously there's synergies there between two organisations. Was it a difficult decision at that time to move on, or was it just an opportunity to kind of lead and grow something, not from scratch, but just early stages?
Totally, yeah. It was, I constantly remind my boss, Nick, now that and actually Lex was my first boss, I think, they interviewed me 3 times and turned me down 3 times before they finally gave me a job at Think Beyond Sports. So eventually they relented. And it was really, I'd been able to come at least sort of 5 or 6 years. They'd gone through a lot of change. There'd been, Kevin, the sort of CEO, had been there for 25 years and set up Sport Relief, had left. And I just felt it was a sort of the right moment to move on, really. And opportunity came up at Think Beyond, which I knew about, and I knew Lex and Nick well. Coming with a partner with Beyond Sport, and I knew that Think Beyond had been set up as a consultancy. I wanted to move out of the pure charity world. I think to that point about actually I sort of started to see the overlap of commercial and kind of sport social change world, and so I noticed. So Think Beyond, I think, was set up in 2015, so it's been running for 2 or 3 years, and this opportunity came up as head of business development. I thought that sounds pretty good. It was obviously a growing agency, and the opportunity to be in something relatively near the start, I think, was really exciting. Having been at Comic Relief, which was obviously much more established and all the rest of it. So yeah, just a really kind of opportune moment all round, really. And
was it a case of? I know you mentioned there you obviously interviewed a few times. Was it that you were kind of tracking? I really want to work there, and it was like obviously approached a few times. We kind of keep your eye on it until something came up, or
it was
banging down the door, maybe.
Yeah, it was a bit. I've sort of, right from Beyond Sport set up in 2008, and I remember, which is right when I'd started my career. And I think quite early on, as I say, when I'd sort of got this idea around sport social change, I'd seen Beyond Sport. I think I'd applied for it. I think my first application was about 2009, and as I say, subsequently. And so at Barclays Spaces for Sport, I was going to work on it. That was the application I originally went for anyway. So yeah, I did have an eye on it, and it was clearly, there's sort of Nick sometimes says that the sports social change sector before Beyond Sport came along was a lot of disparate organisations doing disparate work. And I think what Beyond Sport managed to do was kind of harness a lot of that and bring that, and really create a sector out of it, if you like, and create a kind of a voice. So I had tracked it, and so, yeah, as I say, eventually they relented, and they just thought it was easier to give me a job than have me constantly email.
So if you're going to, obviously for the listeners, I guess it'd be a good opportunity to describe kind of, obviously consultancy, but how do you differ, or what's the offer from Think Beyond?
Yeah, so we, as I say, we're a sort of a sport for social impact and sustainability agency, and really, we focus on working with brands, rights holders, and athletes, and identifying how they can create change, and that sort of in-sport piece. So whether that's rights holders saying, how do we use our own sport to create change, and the platform that it has, and all the rest of it. And then through sport, which typically tends to be with brands, where we say, okay, what is the change that you want to see in society, and how can we help you use sport to create that change? And I think in terms of our point of difference, I would argue, and this sometimes can sound a little bit like a sourpuss, but we just have an incredible, we have a decade of experience working in the space. And I think the recent rise of kind of purpose and this idea of an organisation's purpose has really risen to the surface over the last few years with COVID and Black Lives Matter and all the rest of it. I think we've really been kind of driving that idea for a long time. And one of the other key pieces is this idea of shared value. And I think what we really try and say to organisations is this is not something that sits separately to who you are as a core organisation. If you do this in the right way and you understand what you're trying to achieve and how you can drive impact, it will absolutely drive business returns and business gains. And so, a lot of organizations kind of approach that slightly tentatively and say, we sort of feel we should do this. But actually, if you can integrate it into your commercial model and your business model, it will drive gains and it will have the impact in society that you want it to have. So don't think about them as two separate points. And that is kind of really, I suppose, a key differential of kind of how we approach this area.
I'm always interested to get under the hood a little bit, but I don't know, maybe you can't share secrets, but how do you go about winning business? So is it a case of like these organizations are putting out a request for a quote, or is it like you're strategically thinking, right, well, we're working with this client, or we know this brand, or there's this cause that we think we can bring these, like you can kind of package it up into a classic kind of agency package style. But yeah, I'm just curious how it works under the hood.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, because I think we're not an agency that sits there and goes, right, there's 10 PR briefs or 10 marketing briefs a year and we can go for them and we can pitch them. I mean, probably in the last couple of years, actually, we've had more kind of responses to briefs and tenders that have come out, and we've said, right, we're in a position to be able to respond.
That was what I was curious, because obviously with everything, like kind of the social justice movement, you kind of see, well, it's like brands just want to jump on it, right? So they get on the bandwagon, and it might be, you suddenly see like a flood of, I need someone to help me look like I'm concerned about this cause, I want to do something. Yeah. So you've seen that, have you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has, undoubtedly, there's lots of organisations that have sort of suddenly said, oh, we need to do something in this space. And I suppose, just on slightly going back to your last point about no, not at all. It was something just to add, I suppose, that I think what we also try and do is, and authentic is a word that gets banded around, but ultimately we talk about impact. So organisations go, okay, what's our purpose? What's our higher kind of, higher purpose in society? That's all fine. Actually, what we say is what the impact you're having. So how, to your point about measurement, how do you show that you are having the impact on both your business and on society that you are aiming to do? And, consumers and fans are much more savvy now. They will see if something isn't genuine. And so we really go that extra mile to be able to say, well, let's develop it. So yeah, to your point, so we do get more responses. I think we have an incredible network, and part of our, brilliant relationship with the Beyond Sport Foundation is that comes with an incredible network. And we, there's a number of events that we obviously attend. So I really hope and feel that we're sort of carving out a niche as real specialists in this area. We don't try and be all things to all people. We're not suggesting that we're a full service marketing agency. We are absolutely laser focused on how do you create, positive impact environmentally and socially, while also having the positive benefit to your business. So, we want to be specialists. We want to be kind of unique in that space. And that brings with it its challenges, in that we can't go for every single brief that comes out. But when we do see something, we feel we're really well positioned to go for it.
And is there anyone I don't know if you've got a hit list, or anyone you'd really want to work with, right? So you've got like clients, I know most businesses do, especially those with a service, but it's like, this would be our ideal client or our ideal brand athlete to work with. Have you got any that or maybe you're already working with them? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Well, yeah, I mean, we are, and there are a few that are, Unilever. So we work with Rexona and through Beyond Sport and the team there. But that's a really special one in terms of, Unilever being the sort of poster child, if you like, of purpose-driven brands. And so winning that a couple of years ago was amazing. But I certainly am pretty happy with the clients we've got at the moment, for sure.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said that. Anyone who's not already a client that you want to work with, that should have been the question. Yeah, I'm just curious. I know obviously Fred's been on the podcast before, Beyond Sport Foundation, and I was just wondering how close you guys work together. Is it, it's not like a full like vertical integration, you're not delivering on every single project you work on, but is it almost like I think that's what probably stands you apart from other organisations, because you've basically got your finger on the pulse, right? You've seen what's happening and what works and learning from it. 100%,
James. Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. Again, you asked what was unique. Well, actually, yes, we're a strategic consultancy, but what we have, again, that a lot of other organisations don't, is the ability to deliver on that strategy. Because ultimately we can say, and Unilever is a brilliant example of that, where, we sort of tried to come together to look at, okay, how can we create a programme? Then all the funding that goes to these amazing organisations on the ground it goes through the Beyond Sport Foundation. They do an incredible job of kind of managing and measuring and evaluating that change and really managing those organisations on the ground. So, it is a really unique piece, and the ability for us as a strategic consultancy to go, right, okay, when we are looking at creating this strategy for you, we can tap into Beyond Sport's network of 3,000 grassroots organisations all over the globe. We did a piece of work for Disney during COVID, and we used the network of Beyond Sport in Latin, that was a piece in Latin America, to say, what is happening with you during COVID? What are the challenges you're seeing? We analysed I think it was about 100 organisations in the end from Latin America to say, these are the challenges they're facing. We can then go back to Disney, this huge global brand, and say, these are the challenges that these organisations on the ground are facing, and here's how you help tackle. That ability to kind of be a link between, as I say, these significant global organisations and then these often very small grassroots organisations is really unique and brings us something quite special, I think.
Yeah, I think that's where that I don't like using the word, but authenticity comes in, because it's not like you're thinking, well, this is in the news at the moment, this is trending, maybe we should get together. It's like you always almost started at the end, right? You know exactly where the impact's going to be felt. So, and then you obviously can measure it back, going backwards. Switching gears a little bit, just to talk about, I guess, but it's more about kind of yourself and how you kind of lead and manage and plan your time and stuff. on a day-to-day basis, what are the kind of things that for you, kind of day-to-day recurring challenges, whether it's just, I don't know, whether you're an admin guy, whether you love doing admin, clearing the inbox down, all that type of stuff, or it could be just kind of managing just such a fast-paced organisation. And what kind of comes up for you?
Yeah, it's I'm definitely not an admin guy, and
same here. Yeah,
the whole team will tell you I'm definitely not an admin guy, which is probably a challenge in and of itself. But look, I think probably there are a couple that stand out. One is that fast-paced. We are incredibly lucky to work with some amazing brands and organisations, but we are ourselves a small organisation, and so therefore you're constantly kind of trying to sort of think about the challenges of your clients, while also thinking about how you grow this business. And the ability, as anyone that's run a small agency will know, is constant sort of balance, if you like, of going from, right, we've won this piece of work, how do we bring in staff to make sure we've got people to run that piece of work, but we don't want to overstaff and all the rest of it. And that constant sort of challenge and balancing of that is definitely, it's definitely something that's kind of constantly on my mind, I think, is fair to say. And then the other thing of, clients coming with kind of things they want us to look at. And that means, often changing from looking at, how do we work with this athlete and what are the challenges of an athlete, to a global brand and saying, right, what's this global brand doing? So the ability to almost kind of scale up and down in terms of the size and the scope of strategies and challenges that you're looking at is, again, something that certainly keeps me on my toes. I think it's
I just, as you were talking, I'm thinking about kind of culture as well, in terms of small agency, fast move, agile, you can switching in and out from different projects. And then, but you're also interfacing with these huge corporates. Is there any time where it's like, I was thinking about meetings. So is it like, you've got a massive client who wants meetings, middle management, or there's a lot of people getting involved, but you're trying to be agile. Is there a way that you kind of tackle that, the kind of demands, like, well, let's have another meeting, let's have another call, or you've got a small team. So does that come into it?
Yeah, it does come into it, definitely. I mean, I think culture is a really interesting one. And just from I think beyond perspective, we've talked quite a lot about this. And I think when we were small, we're growing quite rapidly. And actually, we've always said, oh, well, people come here because they understand the work we do, and therefore do we need kind of a big culture piece? And I'm not sure we do, but actually as we grow, we're starting to say, well, maybe we do. And that's about how we treat people and how we work with people. So that's something that's kind of on our minds. And I think you're right. I mean, in terms of the culture of organizations that we work with, that is a constant challenge, because we are working with, a 5-person charity in Latin America, and then we're working with Disney,
exactly, yeah.
Completely fundamental different organizations. So, that's about supporting the team, really, to understand that different organizations do need different things. We are ultimately kind of, responsible for the success of that client and making sure that, how they want to work, we need to be flexible to that and all the rest of it. So really setting those expectations up front, I think, is absolutely fundamental. So we always have that conversation to say, how do we want to manage this? How do you like to be managed, ex client, and making sure that's a conversation so that we can perform to the best of our ability.
Yeah. And I'm assuming over the period of time of your career, you've met and seen a lot of different types of leader. So some positive, some negative. Is there anything that you've kind of, I don't know if you've created this yet, but or think of it like this, but where you've kind of developed your own strategy, your own style of leading, approaching challenges, approaching leading an organisation and scaling one up as you are now? Do you have anything, kind of principles that you've... Yeah,
it's a good question. I think it probably is, to a certain extent, still kind of forming. One of the things, though, for me is about openness. I think that, having a small team and really being open about the challenges that that we do have as a small agency, the challenges that myself and Rada, my co-MD, are going through, not suggesting we've got all the answers, and actually being really, really kind of, being open about that and saying, look, this is something we're on together, I think is really important. The other thing I sort of quite like the idea of, which again, we're sort of playing with, is this kind of high challenge, high support environment. And what I mean by that is, we want everyone to be able to perform to the best of their ability. And we have high expectations of our team and of our staff and all the rest of it. So we do set the bar high. We do drive people. We do expect a lot. But to do that, we absolutely have to create this supportive environment. So there has to be this ability for people to say, okay, if I am being driven, I know the support is there. I know the training is there. I can come to you if I have an issue. I can be really open about that. So, how do you make sure that, yes, the expectations are high, but people don't feel like they're being driven there alone? They really understand that there is this team kind of ethic that comes with that expectation.
And communication is always key in most organisations, or all organisations. Just curious in terms of the dynamic of, you've got co-MD, how does that work? There must be challenges, or how do you go about managing that, or just being, some could say it's like multiplier, right? Two people do job, you get more out of it.
How's it better than one, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm really, really lucky with RB Rada as my co-MD, and I think it happened really naturally. So our old MD moved on. We were sort of looking at what succession planning, and I actually basically wrote an organogram, and I put us both at co-MD. And Rada has been saying, no, I'm not interested. And I showed it to her and I said, well, go on, how about that? And she sort of mulled it over and said yes. And I have to say, I mean, I know that I always think back to the Liverpool managers when it was Gerard Houllier and Roy Evans. Right? Everyone always reminds me. I can't say it's quite come to that yet, but I think we've been really lucky in that we have complementary skill sets. That's, I think, ultimately, the key. So in terms of sort of division of labour, it's actually come really naturally. We've never actually sat down and gone, right, you do this and I'll do this. It's really kind of fallen. She's taken on, a lot of the team stuff. She's brilliant, amazing with the team. Just, the team absolutely trusted to the end of the earth sort of thing. So she's brilliant on that side of things. I've maybe taken on some more of the finance and the business planning side of things, which will surprise anyone that knows me because maths was never my strong point. But so this sort of, it really has. And then we sort of really do share the strategy side of things. So it's working really well. And to your point, actually the ability to kind of, we do face challenges on a daily basis, and to have someone that we can ring up, both me ring her up and the other way around, I think honestly has proved totally invaluable. And I don't think I would have wanted to do this on my own quite yet. So yeah,
that's the thing. It's lonely at the top, right? So it's always good to have someone there who's actually in the role as well, understands exactly the challenges you've got. How would you say, I don't know if you might not think you haven't had to change at all, but in terms of the role you're in now, from the start of your career to now, what areas you've had to grow in to be in the role you are now and be successful?
It's a really, really good question. Practically, I think that side of, so a lot of my role, my previous roles had been about sort of business development side of things and the development of, new clients and really having a laser focus on that. I think the biggest shift that I've gone through in the co-MD role is really kind of taking a step back and understanding the whole business. And that is around, okay, what does the team look like? How do we resource? Sometimes fairly kind of operational side of things, but, just totally fundamental to be able to run a good business. And then I think the sort of personally, I suppose, I'd always hoped that I had a relatively high kind of emotional intelligence, an EQ. Like I sort of have hoped that, but maybe never have sort of tested it out, if you like. And I think the thing that's happening is, again, on a daily basis, there are challenges with the team and, totally natural and nothing kind of that wouldn't be expected, but really trying to understand how you work with team members, how people like to work, how they like to be treated, how they like to be communicated with, all those kind of things. That suddenly, when you've gone from maybe a team of one or two to suddenly you're kind of overseeing a team of 15, 20, it's a really, really different scenario. So I think really trying to understand how I can best be that leader is something that I'm absolutely still working on and still trying to understand. And I doubt that journey will ever be finished, but hopefully it will kind of develop over time, I suppose.
And are you going back to the psychology textbooks and stuff and remember what you learned in uni to put it into
place? Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose if I'd ever read them, then I would be able to read
the strategies.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's an interesting thought, and I probably do kind of try and think back a little bit to some of that, and I think something like the chimp paradox and those kind of bits I do still.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like you kind of articulated there, all that additional mental load. Like my wife likes to talk about mental load, especially like I'm probably same with you. Don't know how many 2-3 kids you've got at the moment, and there's all that other stuff you need to think about, and then you've got your work business and your work family, and all I guess not your kids, but all of the employees and staff and team there. Is there anything you put in place to try and, I guess, just manage that? So stress levels are high, or there's just a lot going on mentally. You've got to look after yourself physically. Do you have any routines that you put in place to kind of try and stay on top of everything?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And to be perfectly honest, it's something, since I took over as co-MD at the start, sort of back end of last year, it's something that, over the last sort of couple of months, I've been really, really conscious of, because I think the danger, as you say, is absolutely that your time is totally taken up with kind of external, if you like, is maybe how best I'd put it, kind of work or family or wherever it might be, brilliant and great things. But I mean, honestly, it comes all the way back to to sport. So I play football once a week. I cycle into work. That gives me 40 minutes to myself to think. And, even on the roads of London, I still manage to do that. So, yeah, I do honestly, it really does come back to carving out that time during the week where I can do some exercise. It completely clears my head. I don't think about anything other than shooting or trying to score a goal, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You can't think of it.
So it really, really does. And I think that is I said to my wife, of all the times during the week, the one I have to protect is Wednesday, 8:30 to 9:30 to play football. And she sort of looked at me and she went, all right, okay, I'll give you that. So that really is it for me. It's about exercise and about that helps me just clear my mind.
Yeah, definitely. It's that transition as well. So like you said, you in the role before, not selfish, but you're just thinking about executing on your actual role. Then you go into the managing the company, everyone else's problems on your shoulders. Then you've got, is it 3 kids under 3 or 3 kids under 4?
2 kids under 2.5. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's like whenever you've written that list and the planning list, this kind of goes out the window, right? Or whatever morning routine you thought you could put in place.
And it's like suddenly your entire day is kind of stuck up, right? And it's like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's selfishly really, and actually I sort of thought about using it, but I think you're absolutely spot on. I think, the shift when you go from, okay, I have to perform this role and this is the role I have to perform and I have to do that really well and I have to make sure I do that. If I do that, everything else will be okay. That shift I felt from going from that to, okay, I'm now responsible for the business as a whole, people's enjoyment and wellness within that organisation. It is it's a bit, I'd almost compare it to the shift from going from not having kids to having kids, on a day without kids, you're like, well, I can do what I want, right? Like I can go and do this.
I find it's even that approach to work as well. Before you could be like, oh yeah, I'll stay a couple of hours after work. I can catch up this a couple of hours after, and it's like your actual productivity time or actual time in work's just like reducing, and there's no flexibility.
Comes and I'm out the door.
I've got to go. Yeah.
But yeah, quite exactly.
Yeah. Last question for me, Matt. I really appreciate you giving up so much time for us. We always reflect back and ask everyone this question. So if you could go back to speak to the younger Sam, maybe before you went to uni, that type of age, and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it'd be believe in the journey, which sounds very, again, probably a bit grand, but I think there are...
I thought you were going to say think beyond.
Can we record that? No. Yeah, I just think, as I say, and I sort of said it tongue in cheek, but this idea of, going for jobs, getting turned down, kind of starting off in a role that, is kind of maybe not perfect, but having that really clear vision, and I probably developed mine a little bit later, but it's a classic thing to say but if you can find something you're passionate about and then believe in the journey of getting there, you made the point that my CV now looks like it all kind of ties together. It never did. It was a bit of luck on the way. And I think that, having that kind of belief and confidence to say, okay, I'll get to where I want to go would probably be the one thing I'd say.
Brilliant. Sam, thank you so much for your time today, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, James. Great chatting.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.